Hey popcorn junkies, how are you? Welcome to this movie review of someone being kneecapped upstairs. Kneecap, a curious film, an Irish-speaking film in parts, a film about language, a film about music, but an incredibly funny film, and also an incredibly, actually quite an existentially nuanced film too, unbelievably, given the fact that some of its strongest scenes are moments of total kind of ketamine-induced hallucination. More on that in a moment. So Kneecap, what is Kneecap? Kneecap is a movie directed by Rich Pepiat, starring, are they actors? Are they musicians? What are they? Who are they? What is this film? Is this film real? Is it based on real life? Is it a mockumentary? Is it a documentary? Is it a rockumentary? In fact, it's a rock, doc, mockumentary, all rolled into one, because this is the kind of fictionalized, embellished origin story, if you like, of the Irish Belfast-based hip-hop group Kneecap. And it takes a sort of punk rock, Sex Pistols, fingers up at the world, fingers up also at the troubles, the history, the strife of Northern Ireland, and it does this in quite a sort of neat. Well, it tries to have its cake and eat it. It tries to have its cake and eat it by saying right at the beginning of the film, we're sick of films in which all the only kind of introduction you get to the troubles in Northern Ireland and Belfast is a montage of petrol bombs, of sectarian violence, of street riots and all that kind of stuff, and funerals and people with masks and balaclavas. But whilst they're telling you that, they're showing us all those things. So they're kind of doing a doobry. They're doing a sort of meta kind of, we're not doing it, but we're doing it, and we're not doing it, but they are doing it. This is the sort of post-Good Friday ceasefire generation. And so this is a curious film because on the one hand, this is a great film as an access point into the troubles, into the history of Ireland, but it's also a film about a really important moment, I think, in very recent and current Irish history. And let's face it, everything we're going through now will become history. You've got the DNA of Spinal Tap in here, you've got the DNA of Sean Ryder, you've got the DNA of Bez. It's huge part comedy, but it's also huge part, serious portrait of a sort of era in Irish politics and Irish society where there's still the slightly older generation, if you like my generation, that's kind of a hangover from the sort of ardent kind of disagreements and sectarian separation between two groups of people, and how actually much younger people now, the band Kneecap being a case in point, are trying to sort of bridge those problems and kind of get on, move on, and that Protestants and Catholics can now interact in a more sort of meaningful and constructive way. Again, this is a film, it's both in English and it's also Irish speaking, so lots of it is subtitled too, but it's subtitled in a very sort of, a bit like the Sex Pistols album, it's kind of scrawled on the screen when you get the, when your characters in this film are speaking in the Irish language, it's kind of scrawled up, so it's quite challenging because there's strong accents. I'm pretty sure I missed some of the absolute wit because I just couldn't quite hang on to a word here and there, but what makes this film particularly mesmerizing and particularly notable is the fact that the three guys playing the three members of the band are the three guys who are the members of the band Kneecap. They were in this, they trained, they learned how to act, and they're not only just acting. Good God, they're acting alongside the likes of Michael Fassbender. Now, I kind of knew this going in. I think if you didn't know this, and now I've told you, you'll all know this, but this is also a spoiler review, so maybe you've only found this out since seeing it. But the less you know about that going into this film, I think the better, because by the time you get to the end of the film and discover that, wow, this is really about them, right down to I'll explain. There's three members of the band. There's two youths, the two youngsters, Liam, and the other one whose name I really struggle to pronounce. Is it Naoise? Naoise? Is it Saoirse? Naoise and Liam? Anyway, I'm going to call him the Robbie Williams lookalike. See, I kept getting Robbie Williams vibes of him. So there's Robbie Williams lookalike, Liam, and then there's the third member of the band, which is the teacher. And the teacher is just brilliant, JJ. And so essentially we follow two scallywag youths. One of them, Liam, gets into trouble. JJ, the teacher's brought in to kind of overcome the language barrier because Liam refuses to speak The Queen's English, he just keeps speaking Irish, and this is annoying the Protestant police. So JJ, the teacher, he's brought in a cell, and he kind of is there, and he effectively kind of lies about what Liam's saying and what they're exchanging between each other, and he gets hooked into this boy and hooked into the other boy who looks like Robbie Williams, and the three of them create Kneecap. But it's a kind of curious combination, 2 kids and a teacher. How weird is that? Now, most notably is you've got the teacher who's married, and as I say, his wife's a sort of activist, if you like, to campaigning for the Irish language. You've then got Liam, who's the one who got arrested at the beginning, and he's having an incredibly intense, quite sort of physical and feisty sexual relationship with a young Protestant woman. There's a lot of explicit sex in this. It is an 18 certificate. The language is fiery, the drug taking is constant, the sex is explicit, and also it's quite angry sex. It's not violent, but it's pretty physical, and it's quite in your face, and it's a Protestant woman and him, Liam, a Catholic, a Republican, and they go at it and they scream and shout all these words about, so they announce names, and they say really kind of contentious things that relate to the Troubles and the history of Northern Ireland. And so almost in their sex, in their sort of vibrant, kind of loud, kind of expressive sex, they're screaming out the words that would have been screamed between Catholics and Protestants during the violence and during the Troubles. But this is a film about the Irish language, and that comes into sharp focus when the Robbie Williams boy, or Nersha, sorry if that's not right, Nersha, is it Nersha? Sweet looking boy, sweet kid, very he's quite quiet, he's very still, very thoughtful, and he's the son of Michael Fassbender's character. And Michael Fassbender's character is like a sort of, he's a kind of photo fit Bobby Sands kind of character, the hunger striker, the IRA kind of martyr, if you like. And in this, Fassbender plays the same. Don't forget, Fassbender played essentially Bobby Sands, didn't he, in Steve McQueen's Hunger, such a powerful film. And in this film, he plays a similar sort of character. He's like the Messiah. But what's quite interesting about Fassbender's character as this Bobby Sands in this film, and the father of the Robbie Williams lookalike boy, is that, again, he's from a bygone era. I mean, admittedly, only 15, 20, 30 years ago, bygone era. But he's still walking around. He's still in hiding. He goes into hiding, leaves his wife. She becomes depressed and doesn't leave the house. The boy, Robbie Williams, the lookalike boy, his son, really misses him, but doesn't have the language to kind of connect with him. He wants to be accepted, and he wants to sort of be respected by his father. But Michael Fassbender's still in the hardcore 70s. He's gone into hiding. Everyone thinks he's dead. They feigned his death. Some quite funny scenes where they kind of, in quite sort of caricature-y fashion, try and show how he tried to feign his death. And he's living this mission, as his wife later in the film says, "You're like one of those old Japanese soldiers still cutting their way through the jungle, thinking the war's still on. Things have moved on." But Michael Fassbender hasn't moved on. He's still involved with the mission, even though the mission is kind of now out of date. It's kind of null and void. Right down to, in the middle of the film, there's a very funny moment where there's a memorial for him. How I'd always see them in the 70s. They'd be on the news. There'd be an IRA memorial or a funeral, and there'd be lots of people with balaclavas, and they'd shoot into the air and all that kind of stuff. They have a memorial for him, and he's kind of disappointed that not more people have turned up. But like his wife says, it's because things have moved on, and so as is the way with almost everything that's Irish, the gift, the joy, the wonder of Irish creatives, whether it be in literature and poetry and music and film, is the ability of Irish creatives and Irish creativity and films about Ireland to completely fuse together tragedy and trauma. It's almost like, it's not even fusing, it's like tragedy and trauma. Out of them comes side-splittingly funny, dark, twisted, satirical humour. And that's what this film is about, because essentially these boys, of the ceasefire generation, if you like, with a teacher in tow, who becomes the biggest junkie, the teacher, because JJ becomes the biggest drug taker of the group in his garage, and they're taking tabs of everything, and very train spottery, right down to the fact that JJ, the teacher, disappears into a bin trying to find the kind of stamp print set of acid tabs and all that kind of stuff. Very funny, very Bez, very, I have to say, all of the musical sequences in this film, of which there are many, a lot of live music sequences, and when they're sort of accompanied with the drug taking and the kind of real creativity that's used in the drug taking scenes, they use stop frame animation, sped up camera, slow-mo, distortion, and all this kind of stuff, real hallucination on the bus the first time the Robbie Williams lookalike or Fassbender Fassbender's son, Nersha. Once he's on a bus and everyone looks the same and they're all wearing the same things. Really funny ketamine hallucination scenes. The drug-taking scenes in this one, I'm a huge fan of drug-taking scenes in films, comedic ones. I mean, I'm thinking of Pedro Pascal and Nick Cage and the amazing, unbearable likeness of Being Me, or whatever it was. Very funny scenes in this. I mean, I was laughing out loud in the cinema I was in. There were quite a few Irish people in the cinema, and everyone was roaring with laughter. It's an uproariously funny film at times. But baked into it all is still this idea that they're singing in Irish because Fassbender has imbued in both his son and Liam, who's nobbing the Protestant woman, he's imbued in both of them the fact that every time, every Irish word spoken is like a bullet shot at the colonial oppressors. Resistance, occupation. I mean, this really, I was reminded, and this riffs, and there are so many connections between the whole Israel-Gaza situation and the Irish problem. And when people wonder why is Ireland so sort of, if you like, sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, it's because many people on the Republican side of things in Ireland feel a real sort of connection and kinship with that sense of a colonial oppressor. Of course, not every Protestant and not everyone in Northern Ireland who is, if you like, on the other side of the kind of fence is that sort of person. But back in the day, and that's what this film is about. This film is about how we've moved beyond some of that stuff. But that background and that history still informs the sort of, the really kind of torn at the edges and frayed at the edges kind of sense of community and society and music and creativity. But baked into this film is the idea that your language is crucial to your identity, crucial to your national identity, crucial to your Irishness, and is a crucial kind of finger up, and not thumbs up, crucial fingers up to the Brits, to the English, to those who took over the country. And I think that's really powerful. There's even a moment at some point in the film where someone says, I can't remember who it is, I think it could have been Fassbender, that basically cowboys are, I'm going to use a really, really dark swear word here, but he said cowboys are cunts. And, it's the idea that, look at things from the perspective of the Native American Indians, because that's, Fassbender who says it. He's saying, we're them. The Irish who were here first, we are them. So it's a film about serious stuff, but it's given to us in not only an unserious way, but in a scatological, completely surreal, bonkers, mental, funny, hysterical, unbelievable, and in-your-face fashion. Now, this film is definitely at its strongest when it's really in those moments. It's actually also at its strongest when it's kind of in the stuff of the language and the bullet, using an Irish word is like a bullet. I could have done with a bit more of knowing what the words were, understanding the music. Did the music have as much of a political kind of statement as I felt it ought to have? If I had one hang-up with the film, I think I was slightly let down or slightly disappointed by the quality of Kneecap's actual music, the songs that they sing in this. None of them really kind of, there were a couple that had a really good sort of driving beat that the teacher, JJ, had kind of developed. But none of them had a real kind of depth, or I hate to use the word, and I don't want to be critical because I've become huge fans of them. I love the band. But none of the tracks in this film, anyway, had that coolness. And that was kind of made more obvious by the fact that this film does have a brilliant soundtrack in which it uses the Prodigy's Smack My Bitch Up at one point, brilliant chase scene with the Orange Men chasing after Nersha, is it, or, the Robbie Williams lookalike. They chase after him in the street, very funny scene, where he's nicked one of their twirling batons, that they walk along and sort of twirl around and all that kind of stuff. They Smack My Bitch Up. They use Orbital's Belfast. And of course, I'd never even made the connection. I was thinking, of course, Orbital, Belfast. Belfast was set in Belfast, one of the greatest. It's just like rave religion, Belfast. What else? And Bicep were in there, obviously. So in a weird way, those songs, though, kind of almost highlighted how kind of, not suburban Kneecap's music was, but it didn't have that, I don't know, I wanted it to have a bit more of a kind of drum and bass type thing going on. So this film really is this. This film is like the love child, the strange kind of MDMA-driven love child of the Happy Mondays, Sean Ryder of the Happy Mondays, Train Spotting, Ewan McGregor and all the madness, and Sex Pistols-esque, even with the kind of scrawled kind of lettering all over everywhere. Lots of lovely shots of all the murals around Northern Ireland and around Belfast too. I mean, this is the absolute this film is the opposite end of the spectrum to Kenneth Branagh's Belfast. Liam, I love Liam's character. He's just always having really kinky, angry sex with this Protestant unionist girl. She's great young actress. She's like right kind of in his face. It's kind of like they want to hate each other but they love each other. They hate each other but they want to have sex with each other. They can't stop it. And it's kind of like almost like what's interesting about their sex life together is it's like the underlying fury of the Protestant versus Catholic history is what's made their sex so highly charged and eroticized, and I think that's quite fun to watch. And they don't deal with it, it's not done in a sort of titillating way either, it's very funny. I love the teacher's slow enticement. So JJ's the older character, his slow enticement out of teaching. Has he bitten off more than he can chew? He's taking too many drugs. There's a moment where his wife lifts up the garage where he's obviously off his tits and he's just sat there with his hand in his pants and he's kind of, is he too old for this? Is he having a midlife crisis? He kind of is having a midlife crisis, but hey, thank God he is, because the band gets together. Then he thinks, no, I need to jack it in, I need to pack it up, I need to behave, I need to be sensible, I need to be a teacher for God's sake. And then they go to a gig and then he gets his buttocks out and they've scrawled stuff on his butt and he can't show his face. And this is where the emblematic balaclava is used by him. He wears the balaclava because at the end of the day, he can't be recognised by his students. There are some moments in this which didn't hit the right notes, and for me, one of those was what was it called? The Radical Republicans Against Drugs. This is like a splinter group, and apparently these groups existed and exist, I think, that were kind of like, whilst all the troubles were going on and kneecapping was going on left, right and centre, there were groups that were trying to stop drugs coming into society. They'd kneecap people who brought drugs in, illegal drugs. It's like drugs was a big no-no, but, and this group was like, they were a bit, I don't know, they were just a bit kind of rent a mob type thing. It was like, I just felt like they'd got 3 actors who were heavies, and they were just kind of like generic heavies, and they were meant to provide a certain kind of threat, a sort of sense of our key characters, our Kneecap band members, kind of trying to evade them and avoid them, because of course they're making most of their money and they're funding most of their music by dealing drugs, selling drugs. It's all about drug dealing, drug taking, drug selling, and this radical group. We needed a bit of jeopardy in there. But that jeopardy didn't ring true for me, and of all the aspects of it, I felt that was the least convincing, and in a weird way it kind of neutered the comedy, because the comedy of the Radical Republicans Against Drugs was a bit too panto and a bit too obvious, like, we're 3 heavies and we're going to take you out. It was just like, we don't need that, because the rest of it was actually quite nuanced. And the 3 actors, or the 3 members of Kneecap who have become actors, are sensational. Each of them, very different style, incredibly unvain performances. You could have knocked me over with a feather when I discovered that the teacher as well was playing himself. Again, it's an interesting film in terms of genres. It kind of goes from, as I say, it goes from rockumentary, documentary, mockumentary. It's all of them rolled into one. This hat is so hard on my forehead. I'm literally having my forehead squeezed into. My brain is currently under pressure, so I'm going to move at pace because I'm in pain. Okay. In essence, this film is an absolute right. It is at its best in the druggy scenes, the musically driven scenes. I'd say that it's at its strongest there. It was really funny. I mean, the moment with stop frame animation where their heads turn into, or the girl that's talking to them's head turns into a ghetto blaster, and they're all just talking. Very hard to recreate. There's nothing more boring than someone talking about taking drugs, and there's nothing less funny than someone trying to retell a very funny scene in a film about drugs. Just watch it because they're funny. Just in watching. It's like the funniest thing to do is I'm not suggesting you take drugs, but talking about them is boring. Taking them is less boring, but I'm not advocating it at all. So it's an incredibly energized film. It's fast, it's adventurous, it beats to its own kind of rhythm, and it breaks its own rules. It's kind of a lawless little film that isn't kind of too interested in all the rules of filmmaking, and in that there are some real sparks of genius and sparks of creativity and indie ingenuity in there too. But there are other times, like for example, there's the Protestant detective woman who's kind of always after them, a bit like the heavies. I have to say, I think where this film failed most was in all the sort of, if you like, antagonist characters, the ones that were trying to oppress them. It was a bit too, it was like Minder, or the professionals, over the barrel of a car and kind of push you up against the wall and go, don't you be doing this to Sonny Jim, otherwise I'm going to ruin your life, from the police. And I thought she was a bit predictable. So there were those elements. I thought that didn't work so well. But the characterisation of the police actually was least convincing, and the threat of the police was the least convincing. But as I say, if Kenneth Branagh's Belfast is a romantic poem about the Troubles, and not shying away from how difficult they were and how traumatic and how they split families and all this kind of stuff, this film was a violent vomit in the face or in a bucket of Belfast. But really interestingly, it just showed how, I think this film shows how you can still talk about the Troubles, talk about the history of Ireland, and acknowledge that actually we have, or the country and the city has profoundly moved on, that we can still be sort of affected by all the trauma of what's gone on in the past. And in fact, there's a really interesting moment in this film where they talk about the trauma of what's happened to their ancestors and, the older generations, and how that's been baked into their DNA. And there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, trauma, PTSD, all that sort of stuff is real, I mean, when you look at problems like, flashpoints like Gaza, like South Africa with apartheid, and the ANC, any colonial rule, any oppression, slavery, of course, it does go into the DNA. This isn't fanciful thinking. I think it's easy for colonial white people to say, really? What? This trauma is in you? Yes. It affects your DNA, and this film talks about that too. And again, as I say, what I really like about this film is the way in which it keeps pinning its sort of colours to the idea of language. It doesn't lose sight of that thread all the way through it, right down to the fact that, and this is a spoiler review, Fassbender essentially doesn't literally fall on his sword because he's not dead, but he comes out of hiding. He sort of, in a sense, gives himself up, and like a very naughty little boy, he is the Messiah. He returns and he comes and he gets his moment in the sun. But there is that sense of, yes, everyone's he's more like Jesus, even to the Protestant cop. He's more like Jesus's second arrival, because even in his sort of handing himself inness, it's a reminder that he's of a bygone era and things have moved on. They haven't been forgotten, but they have moved on. And in a sense, this film looks to finding other ways of holding on to and cherishing Irishness. And I love the way in which the Irish language is one way, or the way, that this band and this film does that. As well as, to be brutally honest, taking a shitload of fucking drugs. Ketamine, MDMA, acid, spliff. There's a fuckload of drugs taken in this film, and it's hysterical. This is great fun. This is a brilliantly fun film. I would fully recommend having a few beers, if you're not a recovering alcoholic. Head down the cinema and just kick back and have a laugh. It's just nutcasey. It's boys having fun. As I say, only disappointment slightly. I just wish their music was a bit stronger and a bit more a bit cooler, I suppose. But anyway, Kneecap, what would I give it? I think I'd give it 89 out of 100.